Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
So I think we can let our friends in online.
Welcome, everybody, from the Zoomiverse.
Welcome.
Shabbat Shalom.
So if we want to turn our attention to the screen, we're going to begin tonight. Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tzar ma'od. It's also on page 339 in your prayer books. If you're joining us virtually, you'll find the prayer book in the chat throughout. That way you can follow along.
Kol ha'olam kulo kesher tzar me'od, kesher tzar me'od, kesher tzar me'od, kesher tzar me'od, kol ha'olam kulo kesher tzar me'od, kesher tzar me'od. והעיקר, לא לפחד, לא לפחד כלל, והעיקר, לא לפחד כלל. כל העולם כולו, כל העולם כולו, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד. כל העולם כולו, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
It's so wonderful to see all of us together, whether we're together in this room or we're together virtually. I don't know about you guys, but I felt like I really needed tonight. And I'll speak a little bit more about this when we reach the Devar Torah or the sermon. But I took the words to heart that I read today, interestingly enough, from our congregant sitting right here, from Jody Radorin, who spoke about the need that she felt to show up, to be together, to feel the community around us. Whether you've been thinking a lot about what happened to Texas, or you're just carrying the general weight or anxiety of the world right now, there's something that you can feel enlightened by being surrounded by community and by ushering in Shabbat. And so we're going to move toward ushering in Shabbat together. Tomorrow, Max will be called for the first time as a bar mitzvah up to the bima. And so in honor of that, he's going to help us to usher in Shabbat by lighting our candles and blessing our wine as together we turn to page 2 and 3. And I want to invite him up with his immediate family.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we in our own day be among those who kindle light.
So if you want to light the candles now.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר קידשנו במצוותיו
וציוונו
להדליק נר של שבת.
O source of light and truth, creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words we shall speak into our hearts and our lives. Bless all who enter the sanctuary in need, all who bring the offerings of their hearts. May our worship lead us to acts of kindness, peace, and love.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kichanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu. B'shabbat kodshoch be'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu. Zikaron lema'aseh v'reshit. Kichu yom techila lemikra'e kodesh. Zecher litiat mitzrayim. Kivanu v'acharta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim. V'shabbat kodshecha be'ahav u'ratzon hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh ha'shabbat.
All right. Thank you. I'll take that book back. So we're going to turn now to page number 20 as we move into the singing of L'chadodi.
לקראת כלה בני שבת בני שבת נקרא וג'וין יאללה לה 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 לחדודי יאללה לה יאללה לה לה לקראת כלה יאללה לה 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 בני שבת בני שבת נקבלה. שמור וזכור בדיבורך ישמיענו אל המיוחד אדוני אחד ושמו אחד לשמו תפארת בלי תחילה יאללה יאללה לה 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 לחדודי יאללה יאללה לה 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 לקראת כלה יאללה לה 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 בני שבת בני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכוון לך כי מקום הברכה מראש מקדם משוכה סוף מעשה ומחשבה ותחילה
Let's hear you.
יאללה לה 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 לחדודי יאללה לה 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 לקראת כלה עליי פני שבת, פני שבת נקבלה.
Verse number 5, Hitorari.
כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה, עלייך נגלה, יאללה יאללה לה 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 לך אדוני אליי, יאללה לה 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 לקראת כלה, יאללה לה 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 פני שבת, פני שבת נקבלה.
We rise together, verse number 9.
אויבי שלום, עטרת בלה, גם בשמחה ובתולה, תוך אמונה עם סגולה, בואי חלה, יאללה יאללה לה 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 לך דודי, יאללה יאללה לה 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 לקראת כלה, יאללה לה 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 פני שבת, פני שבת נקבלה, יאללה לה 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 לך דודי, יאללה 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 לה לה לקראת כלה, יאללה לה 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 פני שבת, פני שבת נקבלה.
We remain standing, page 28. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Vaed.
We're seated together. We're on the top of page 31. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, Hama'ariv, Aravim.
Amen.
Page 32.
אהבת עולם בית ישראל, עמך אהבתה, תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לי בכוחנו ובקומנו, נשיח בחוקיך, ונשמח בדברי תורתך, ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגד יומם ולילה, יומם ולילה, ואהבתך לתסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד.
Page 36.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך.
ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ושופך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטפטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך וישעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
Top of page 39. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there's a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. Page 40.
Adonai, join all together. Michamocha ba'elim Adonai, Michamocha nedar b'kodesh, Nora tehilo nosevele, Nora tehilo nosevele. Malekutecha ra'u banecha, u'keyayim yam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam. מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
The prayer that we traditionally do on page 42 is a prayer about unease. It's a prayer about fear. It's what we say at night when we don't know what will become of us. In the ancient days, night was a scary time. And so we ask God to take care of us as we fell asleep and we were vulnerable, to allow us to rise up and to be safe. Well, this is a time of vulnerability. And in lieu of reading this prayer, though I'll end with the Chatimah, the last words of this prayer, I want to read reading that I wrote maybe 2 years ago for the Central Conference of American Rabbis. They commissioned a number of different rabbis who are writers to write different prayers about topics that didn't currently have prayers for them. And this is a prayer called the fear of anti-Semitism. As in so many times throughout our history, our Jewish community is surrounded by uncertainty, unsure of what danger, what vitriol, what violence might await us. In this era of rising anti-Semitism, we call upon you, God, to be our partner. When we face enmity, fill our hearts and those of our detractors with love. When we meet bigotry, puncture the ignorance surrounding us with truth. When we see only short-sightedness, open the eyes of the blind. When fear overcomes us, show us the light of courage. When we feel alone, find us hands to soothe us. When we seek to turn inward, find us partners with whom to stand in solidarity. We stand in the footsteps of our ancestor Buriah, praying not that the wicked will disappear, but rather that their wickedness will. Let those inclined to hate question their intolerance, break their fanaticism, and burst open their narrow-mindedness. Guide our leaders to speak out, our law enforcement to stand firm, our judges to rule justly. Let all those who profess faith walk with us along this unsteady and rocky path, and let us in turn walk with them along theirs. We are a people blessed with perseverance, boldness, and fortitude. Help us to tap into these virtues. All darkness will disappear when we join our light with the lights of others. May this happen speedily in our day so that we, along with all humanity, will find our place each under our own vine and fig tree, and none shall be afraid. And so we end with the Chatimah, the last line of this prayer. Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukat shalom aleinu, v'al kol amo Yisrael v'al Yerushalayim.
Amen.
We're on page 44.
You know, I had a moment just a second ago in taking those words in where I didn't want to chant this next text. I thought it started to feel wrong for a moment to say, Yismechu v'malchutecha shomrei Shabbat, to be worried about keeping Shabbat and making it a delight and making it matter and having it be meaningful in the face of terror and fear, and it's exactly what we need to do. At least we need to name that you have to continue to be all of it, fear and delight. So we're going to go for it, even though it feels a little wrong. Here we go. Yismechu
v'malachutecha shomrei 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat.
Yismechu
v'malachutecha shomrei 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat.
שבי שבת כולם ישבעו ויתקנו מטובך שבת ישמחו במלאכתך שומרי שבת קורא אור שבת ישמחו במלאכתך שומרי שבת
Let's hear you. Yismechu
v'malachutecha shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismechu v'malachutecha shomrei
eyes together, turning to page 146, and after this opening benediction, we'll move into silence through page 64, either the traditional words on the page or the words of your heart.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha.
Invite you to look once more at the screen as we come into this moment of speaking again as a community instead of only inwardly. Just felt like it would be the right, I would need to remember to start even so, even though I'm afraid, from a place of chesed, from a place of love, of a place of compassion. So that's where we will land. Olam chesed ibaneh chesed ibaneh yarara ilai ilai olam chesed ibaneh yarara yalala ilai olam chesed ibaneh yarara ilai ilai
So first we start with ourselves. I must build this world from love. And you must build this world from love. And if we build this world from love, then God will build this world. We'll build this world from love. One more time, everybody. Olam chesed yipaneh. Olam chesed yipaneh.
At this point in our service, we turn to page 253 with an opportunity each time we gather together in prayer to offer a Mishaberach, a prayer for those in need of healing. Mishaberach avotenu v'imotenu, Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, v'Leah, hu yivarech et hacholim. The one who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless and heal those who are ill. And as I look around the room, if you'd like to add names for those that you're thinking of, and then we'll continue on the bottom as well as looking at the screen for our list. The Blessed Holy One be filled with compassion for their health to be restored and their strength to be revived. May God swiftly send them a complete renewal of body and spirit, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach avotenu mekor habracha may the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach imotenu mekor habracha liavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Shabbat Shalom. So, Saturday afternoon and Saturday night was a difficult time for all of us. And I have to admit that it was an especially difficult time for rabbis. I don't know why. I mean, look, nothing compares to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was the first, it was the shock. But there was something unique about last weekend, about Colleyville, that felt to me like it hit home in a different way. There's this idea in kind of psychological language, and rabbis pay a lot of attention to it, which is called transference. The idea that sometimes when you're seeing someone else in trauma, you begin to see yourself. And the goal, by the way, if you're going to be serving someone in the hospital or meeting with somebody who is mourning, is to try to keep that away, right? So that you don't end up thinking that the situation is anything other than it is. But I couldn't help but imagine myself in the shoes of that rabbi. He was around my age, maybe a little bit older. The rabbinic generation is really 5 years. And so he just, I think, was about 7 or 8 years older than me. He had a young family like I do. And so I saw myself. And the truth is, there's a lot of emotions that I felt as I was watching the news. I was scared for him. I was scared for us. I was sad. And I found myself also naturally doing what I always do, which is fighting anger. I struggle a lot as a person with anger. Not that I get angry, but rather sometimes I don't allow myself to. Anger bubbles up, and I think to myself, you know what, I'm not going to go there. And I don't actually tap into it. I don't actually feel it. I let it go. I pretend that it's so insidious that I shouldn't ever encounter it. What I want to tell you tonight, and what I want to explore, is the fact that among the many other things that we need to do to deal with anti-Semitism, we have to be able to tap in to our sense of anger. What happened in Texas should make you angry. And it should make you angry on any number of levels. Because actually, anger is one of the ways that we are going to deal with anti-Semitism. And I want to explain tonight how that is. So when I was right out of college, and I think I've told this story actually from the Bema on a High Holidays, Tommy Thompson, who was running for president at the time, he was the Health and Human Services Secretary, decided to address the Religious Action Center's kind of yearly meeting. The Religious Action Center is the social justice arm of Reform Judaism. And he got up there, and he said what he thought was actually a compliment. He said to us, look, we know that you, as a Jewish community, are great at business. You're amazing at finance. And because of that, you've allowed yourself to make your way into every corner of American, kind of economic society. And you should be proud of that. Now, that, by the way, is something that probably a Jew could say to another Jew behind closed doors with caveats and nuance. Having Tommy Thompson say that was problematic. Now, he, by the way, got off the stage, realized he had said the wrong thing, got up, and by apologizing, he reiterated how true his statement was, but that he's sorry he said it in that moment. But the reason that it was kind of problematic for me is because as a young person, one of the things I didn't quite get was why it is that the Jewish world took this so seriously. I didn't fully understand when I was hearing what he was saying, how it could be wrong enough that it would end up in the national newspaper. How it could be wrong enough that the Jewish community would become outraged over it. It felt to me like it was a slip, it was innocent, and there was no reason for him to have, honestly, his political career tanked over that one statement. Now, throughout tonight, I'm not going to advocate for cancel culture because cancel culture is problematic in many number of ways. But what I am going to say is that sometimes, especially we, think that we should downplay mistakes that are made that fall and cross a line into anti-Semitism. We don't want to see someone taken to task for what they say. But the casual anti-Semitism that Tommy Thompson said in that moment can be drawn a straight line all the way up to what happened in Texas. There are different shades of the same thing. And the goal is that we will never be able to stop fundamentalism. We will never be able to stop white supremacy fully. It will always be part of our society. Unfortunately, anti-Semitism is endemic. But what we can do is we can learn to have a kind of outrage when we see it, so that we stop what is called anti-Semitic tropes when they begin to appear early on before they actually get extreme. Now, what is an anti-Semitic trope? Many of us have heard this before. Things like, Jews are great with money. Things like, Jews have all the power. Things like, Jews control the government. Things like there's a cabal of Jews who have their hands in everything, including the messages that Hollywood gives you. Now, you may not have heard it said exactly like that, but there is a kind of casual anti-Semitism that exists in American discourse that often we brush off. We think that we want to address the Pittsburghs and the Poways, the Colleyville, Texases, and the Muncie, New Yorks. But what we fail to realize is that we have to say something. We have to become outraged. We have to overreact even when we hear those small, subtle things. Because the more normative that it gets in a culture, the more it becomes something that can blow up, that can become someone showing up at a synagogue and doing what this man did. Now, if you don't know exactly what happened, I want to make sure you really understand where the anti-Semitism was on Saturday, because it's not necessarily so clear-cut. And the FBI originally said, by the way, that it was not an anti-Semitic incident because he didn't target a Jewish community in order to make, well, let's say it was not his final step to target a Jewish community. What he wanted was someone who had ties to Al-Qaeda freed from prison. And because his aim was the freedom of that person, not the terror of a Jewish community, the FBI originally declared it not an anti-Semitic incident. But let's pause and think for a second of what this man was thinking. He assumed that if he showed up at a synagogue, that this rabbi was connected to every other rabbi in the country. And this rabbi could get a rabbi in New York City, Angela Bookdahl, on the phone, who was so powerful that she could get the ear of the president and make things happen and free this terrorist from prison. That's an anti-Semitic trope gone too far. It's Jews have all the power, Jews have their tentacles in everything, Jews are in control, Jews are so connected that they can get everything done that they want to get done. The casual anti-Semitism that we find in the world was on steroids on Saturday. And although we can't meet and greet every one of those people who might show up at the synagogue in the way that this man did, we can fight very hard with anger against those stereotypes when we see them in the real world. It happened, and I wrote about this to the congregation, that on Thursday I happened to have a meeting with Dr. Pons on the calendar. Dr. Jonathan Pons is basically the head of the Montclair schools. He's the superintendent of the Montclair schools. And after an anti-Semitic incident that happened a couple months ago, all the rabbis got together and we said to Dr. Pons, look, when something happens, give us the heads up before everybody else knows what's happening. Because if we as rabbis know, we can deal with it in our community. We can talk them down. We can lower the temperature. And he said, absolutely. And we met with him twice, and it was a really great meetings, talking about what needed to happen. Well, you may not have heard, because they've been dealing with it quite well, but somebody had etched into the wall of one of the stalls of the bathroom the words Heil Hitler. And Dr. Pons immediately started an investigation to figure out who did it, but his first call was to us. And so that happened about a week ago, and we scheduled a call for this week to find out what he was doing, not just about that incident, but then to strategize about other ways that we could bring speakers in and we could work to deal with the anti-Semitism, the casual anti-Semitism that would have caused a kid to do this. And we talked about other things. We talked about racism and Islamophobia and any number of other issues that we could all work together on through all the religious leaders, through all the leaders in the community to address, anti-Semitism just being one of those things. But Dr. Pons said something that I think was really important in that conversation, which is he was outraged. And what was he outraged about? He was not outraged that a person would etch Heil Hitler on the wall. There will always be a kid who decides to try out racism, xenophobia, all of that. And as much as we educate, it's going to be hard to root all of that out. Just like it's going to be hard to stop things from ever happening to synagogues around the country again. He wants to do his best, of course. But the thing that bothered him the most was how many people probably walked by and how long it had been up before someone reported it. And in fact, someone took a picture and sent it to their parent, who that parent then reported it, rather than the kid realizing they needed to report it in the first place. Now, why is that important? Because that means that we haven't inculcated in one another that anger that we find when we encounter hatred, whether we're talking casual or overt. That anger that I said that we are supposed to feel in the face of anti-Semitism, by the way, anger that we're supposed to feel in the face of many other hates as well, needs to be part of us. We need to be so on the edge that we are ready to explode with anger when we see it, because it means that we will not be complacent. It means that we will do something about it. I'm not going to lie, I'm tired. I'm sure every single one of you is too. And the truth is, if I was walking down the street and I heard something that was anti-Semitic, there'd be a piece of me that said, do I really want to encounter this? Do I really want to say something to this person? I've got 2 young kids at home. It's COVID. They haven't been vaccinated yet. I've been a rabbi for 2 years during this pandemic, right? We've got a government that can't even function, get anything passed. I'm tired. And so I imagine are all of you. And I think part of the reason that people didn't become more outraged over Colleyville, especially outside of the Jewish community, the reason that not a single of my interfaith partners reached out to me this week, is that I think we are all just drained. It's not that they didn't want to. It's that we are so in our own bubbles that we didn't even think to. We have to learn to become outraged. As Jews, we have to allow ourselves sometimes to overreact, because only by overreacting can we actually educate the community that casual anti-Semitism leads to things like what happened on Saturday. But we also have to tap into that anger when we see anything around us that bothers us. We have to learn the art of what Judaism calls the tochacha, the rebuke. We have to call it out when we see it. It's that approach that's the way that we are going to find out of this. Anti-Semitism is endemic, but there's something that we can do. We cannot be so tired that we ignore it. And we can teach other people not to be so tired that they ignore it too. We have to call it when we see it. And then it will become intolerable to say the kind of things that build up to become those delusional beliefs that caused Saturday to happen. Shabbat Shalom. We're going to turn to page 282 as we rise for Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים, לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא.
Page 287.
ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא, יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו, ושמו, ושמו אחד.
We pause at the conclusion of our service to think of those that we've loved and who we've lost. We're going to turn to page 294. And this week, our community recalls the following individuals: Anna Pell, Harvey Bass, Morris Bellett, Dorothy Blackman, Linda Blair, Robert Buckbinder, Deborah Busin, Isidore Shavat, Samuel Cohen, Philip Cooper, Joseph Ebner, Hillel Felder, Pauline Foreman, Irving Abraham Friedman, Martha Fritz, Iris Geller, Saul Gerson, Pauline Gittleman, Rosalie Goldfarb, Elaine Gorfinkel, Howard Hirsch, Philip Holland, Samuel Indek, Barney Jacobs, Alice Janilis, Howard Kagan, Hyman Cantor, Jay Kravitsky, Rona Lavner Rose, Sharon Lawyer, Rose Lazar, Harry Lefkowitz, Harry Levin, Hannah Leaf, George Malloy, Hyman Mandel, Edwin Margolis, Erwin Michelson, Eleanor Morris, Irving Nam, David Newworth, Minnie Newworth, Cecilia Olinger, Lillian Paroff Feinstein, Doris Pollock, Isidore Protis, Leo Reitman, Gloria Reddig, Philip Rothman, Leo Sakharov, Bob Sarlin, Anita Schreier-Reiches, Michael Schramm, Sandra Schweghofer, Frida Hartman-Scott, Howard Sherman, Frida Schubes, Sam Silverman, Dorothy Smith, Jack Smoger, Barbara Spiro, Minnie Spitz, Minna Stein, Leo Steinbeck, Frank Stone, Edna Rosalind Weitz, Elsie Weiselman, Mary Wojak, Fanny Wolfman, Mayor Yarmush, and Leonard Zombeck. And those who are in their Shiva and Shloshim periods of mourning: Ellen Berman, mother of Doug Berman; Francois Laurent, mother of Anne Laurent; our member Joan Sutton; Sue Nussbaum, mother of Jody Nussbaum; Arlene Stryer; and Arnold Block, husband of Leslie Block. In addition, I'll invite anyone here to share names of people for whom they're thinking, or people that are in their one-year period of mourning. I'll invite anybody who's joining us virtually to put any names into the chat that you want. As together again, we turn to page 294. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, b'yamad divrach yirtzeh v'yamlech malchuteh, v'chayachon v'yamechon kol Beit Yisrael, b'agalah uvizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mavrach le'olam u'amei almaya, yiparach v'yishtavach v'yipa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitzadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudashah b'richu. Le'ilam min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, tamiram b'yama v'imru amen. Yehei shlam rama min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'hakol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'romav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'hakol Yisrael v'imru amen. Please be seated. So a few announcements. Do you have anyone you want to start with, Cantor? We'll start with tomorrow. So tomorrow morning, Torah studies at 8:30 a.m. And then our service here, 10 a.m., as we call Max Up, to become Bar Mitzvah, and to read Torah for the very first time in public. In addition to that, next weekend is our Shabbaton. We're really excited about the different courses that we've gotten offered. So we've got services, you can come in person or watch virtually. And then the classes this year are going to be virtual. 2 different blocks of classes, 3 teachers in the first block, or 4 teachers in the first block, 4 teachers in the second block. And so I'll be teaching one of the classes, looking forward to learning with you all. And if you want to learn about Ulysses by James Joyce, that's my class, just a heads up.
And don't forget, we're going to close with Havdalah at 5:30 that night.
That is true. Havdalah at 5:30. In addition, look, there's plenty of other things going on. You can look on our e-blasts for more information. I'll give one plug just because she's here. So Jody Radorin is planning a soup swap, which she did last year. Look, it's cold. It's
She makes
winter.
good soup, too.
And we sometimes could use a meal that wasn't cooked by us. And so there's going to be kind of a drop point about, I think, like 8 days from now, so a week from Sunday, in the courtyard. You come, you bring your soup in quarts, and you basically trade with other people so that you get a chance to try other people's home-cooked meals. You put them in the freezer, and you kind of break in case of emergency. Or you can eat that night, whatever you wanted to do. So any other things on the calendar that
Just
you
to
want?
keep in mind that next month, February 10th, is just a weeknight, but we're going to do a special program where we invite the editors of a new and really very useful book for Jewish communities about the power of and the potential to do inclusion in a really significant way in many, many different lenses. And the editors of the book have put together a wonderful group of articles addressing a whole bunch of different topics around inclusion. And we are going to have them speak about what it was to put this text together, and then do a little bit of small circle conversations about what it is in our community that are the challenges and the great accomplishments, sponsored by our inclusion committee.
And I do want to flag an email that's going to go out early next week. We put it in the Garrett for our e-blast for 2 weeks, but I think it got a little buried. So we're really launching it with this standalone email. It's called Circles of Support for Israel. And basically the idea is people are going to come together, and it's like a traditional giving circle. Everybody antes up a certain amount of money, and you'll join groups depending on how much money you want to ante up. Let's say everybody antes up $100. There are 15 people in a group. That then is $1,500. Then we're going to create a little curriculum for your group to study and to think about nonprofits in Israel that speak to your values. So what are your values around Israel? It's a great way to figure out that question when there's actual skin in the game, right? When there's money on the line. And then together your group will decide which nonprofit actually gets that money that you've all anteed up, and you'll make a donation to that group. And so it's great because it allows you to make a difference, it allows you to explore your values, and it allows you to really kind of up your impact. $100 is not the same as $1,500 to an organization. And so by being able to talk and to figure something out, you make a meaningful gift. And again, 100 was an example. There's going to be different levels per group that you might decide to join, depending on how much you want to ante. So with that, why don't we close today?
Yeah, we're going to close with the words that help us land in our Kaddish, the words Oseh Shalom Bimromav. This melody for me brings me right back home. I hope that it will feel that way to you. Oseh Shalom Bimromav, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol Yoshvei Tevel v'yimeru Amen. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol Yoshvei Tevel v'yimeru Amen. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom
Shabbat
to those
Shalom,
virtual and
friends.
those in person. Shabbat
Shabbat
Shalom.
Shalom all.
Thank you, Edward.